Hello, Blake Rudis here, and welcome to day 22 of the 30 days, 30 critique sessions. Today, we're going to look at F64 Elite member Helen Johnson's image for our critique session. We do have a twist, but before I do that, I want to talk about the comments here. We went to day 21 yesterday without having anybody say anything negative about someone's image, and I really appreciate that. And I understand that you aren't going to like something, and there's nothing wrong with not liking something, but there is something wrong with calling something horrible or terrible. So here's the deal: if the comment that you're going to make is not constructive, don't make it at all. Okay, you can very easily just walk away. It's that simple. If you do leave a negative comment, just know that I will put you in your place for that, because these are people that are putting their images forward so that we can get education. And if you're going to be rude and inconsiderate to that, I will use this button that I have called Hide User from Channel. And it's beautiful because you see your stuff, but nobody else does. Forever. I love it. I love it because I don't even see your comments anymore. Some people might say, well, that's censorship, Blake, or why are you treating us like we're third graders? The deal is some adults need to be treated like third graders. Okay, so our twist comes from Heike. Use a curve with Alt plus Auto at luminosity blend mode to balance the tone of an image. Then a curve with Alt plus Auto at color blend mode to balance the color of the image. Then also a gradient adjustment layer as reflected spotlight. Set it, rasterize the layer, and transform or warp it to relight the image. That's really cool. And actually, that gradient adjustment layer thing, that's something that I just did recently in an image that I'm working on with another individual. And I got to tell you, it's a phenomenal way to work with gradients. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's going to give us some really cool things that we can work with here. And let's see what happens with this image, with this crazy twist. Thank you, Heike. Okay, so we are looking at F64 Elite member Helen Johnson's shot. There's something about this location that you just can't replicate it anywhere else in the world. It's wonderful, the landscape that we see in the Utah and Southwest area there, with all the interesting, almost what looks like architecture in the landscape. And that's really neat because a lot of times we see mountains, we see rivers, we see waterfalls, but these actually look like they're skyscrapers in the middle of the landscape. And then we have the landscape in front of it. I enjoy these spaces because of that. And I always enjoy I have seen so many different renditions of this area, but every single time I see them, it feels like something new because of the way that the compositions come in. And I think that this is no different. I like that I'm being grounded by that bush in front of me. It gives me a place to stand. Almost makes me feel as if I could be that bush, onwardly looking out into the architecture of the landscape. And I think that that's really a unique way to showcase this area, because a lot of times we see just shots of the architecture, these structures in the background with beautiful clouds and sunset, sunrise, whatever that might be. But here we have almost like a midday shot, and I think that it's just as beautiful as something like a sunrise or a sunset, because you see those shadows are harder, but I think that they sculpt out the environment in a unique way that we don't see with softer light. And I like that. Now, my disconnect though. I love your tones, love your colors. I think you've really worked that in there well, to the point that it's not overdone, and it works very well. The problem is I feel like it's very dark in the foreground, and I find it very difficult for me to really want to be in that foreground. I find that the gaze of my eyes is actually just at the upper half. So basically from this point right here onward and upward, that's all I'm really looking at. And this down here is almost like, well, why are you putting this here? I don't really want to look down here. Just crop this. And when we add these elements here, there's a reason why we add these elements here. So let's just get the viewer to look at those elements and we'll be good to go. So let's hop into Photoshop and we'll try Heike's twist here. This is an interesting one. We're going to go ahead and add 2 curves adjustment layers. Okay, and 1 curves adjustment layer, I'm just going to call Lum for luminosity. I'm going to change the blend mode to luminosity. And then this one, I'm going to change to color and change the blend mode to color. Essentially what we're doing here is the RGB curve will work on the luminance value and the color at the exact same time. So this is just a container for the data that we have that's below it. So we're going to do the tones first. I always do tones first, and then we'll work with the colors. Now that could be, maybe it's better the other way around. I don't know. But when you press Alt or Option and press Auto, it gives you the options for what you want to do as auto. So you can do enhance contrast, You can do enhanced per channel contrast rather than monochromatic contrast. You can do fine, dark, and light points, or enhanced brightness and contrast. Honestly, I think this one's going to work best for me because it does open up this space more. So if I were to show you something like our tone evaluation, we put that on here. This is going to help me get more into this space right here. You see that? Okay. So then we have that getting us into that space more because it's brighter. Now, I don't necessarily like it for the top half of the image, but I'm going to do this color one first, and then we'll see what we can do about the top half of the image. So under the color example here, I'm going to press Alt or Option and click on Auto, and then see what works best. Is it going to be enhanced monochromatic contrast, per channel contrast, fine light colors, or enhanced brightness and contrast? I think enhanced brightness and contrast helps. I'm going to go ahead and press OK on that and see what that's doing. So it hasn't really done much to that curve. It just added a little bit of a bump in the highlight area. So it didn't do much to this image. It adds a little subtle hint of color, but it's not that crazy. Let's see what happens as we increase this. So this is only working on the color. So you can see when we do this, it's going to increase the intensity of that color because we've separated this curve to only work on color. Whereas if we were to make this normal, it's going to do everything. So you see what Heike's just recommended here is that we use two curves to split the luminance value and the color. So I know that I was only supposed to use auto, but I used auto and then I use this as an opportunity to teach as well. So we'll leave it at that. But let's use this gradient that Heike told me to use here. So I've got to use a gradient that's going to be a reflected gradient that I can use here to open up that space a little bit more, and then I'll just kind of sculpt it out a little bit. So let's go ahead and go to our gradients. Okay, and the gradient we need to select is a reflected gradient. So you might be thinking, you're only doing this stuff for the sake of the challenge, Blake. And part of that is true. I do have to do this for the sake of the challenge. But what I also have to tell you is that when I was experimenting with this image yesterday, before I recorded it this morning, I did a lot of things with curves and with gradients to work on this image. And I used them in a different way, but they're getting me to the same place. I still want to open up the foreground of this image. So regardless of whether I'm using Heike's challenge or I'm doing this based on the way I would do it without Heike's challenge, you can get to the same place in Photoshop using multiple different tools. That's what I love about Photoshop. There's no one trick ponies here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and press OK on this just so that I can set up my blend mode. I'm gonna change this to the vivid light blend mode, because this will help me get me some more light and color down here. And I'll drop the fill down to about, let's say, 30% for now. So now I'll double click this because I need to see where I want this gradient to be, and I need to see if I need this to be a different color. So I'm going to click on the color. I'm going to change this to a little bit of a brighter color to get the eye in there a little bit more. I'm going to see if that orange is the color that I want. Green could work. You see how green is really working to get that light in there on that bush right there. Let's see, magenta kind of gives me more of that color cast that we would have for evening light. But I honestly think green is working out really well for me here. So I'm going to press OK on that. And I'm going to use this light green. Let me see if I can get a little bit lighter. Okay, there we go. And then press OK on this. So let's press OK on this. And then we'll turn our viewer navigation map on. You see that it's actually bringing in a beautiful amount of light to this space where it's not too bad. But here's what I want. Now that I look at this, I kind of want this to hit these bushes like this, almost in like a U-shaped pattern. So this is perfect because, you know, I can't twist that gradient without rasterizing it. And that was what Heike had brought up. So I'm going to right click this and say rasterize layer. What that'll do is instead of that being a gradient now, this is now something that I can twist, manipulate, transform to any way that I please. So in order for you to see this, I'm going to change this to the normal blend mode. Okay, and I'm going to change this to fill back to 100. So we can see where this beam is. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and then Warp. Okay, so with the Warp tool, I'm going to grab the bottom here and pull this up like this, and then pull it up like this, and then pull it up like this on these corners. And then I'll pull this down in the middle, and then pull this up like this. I'm just bending and warping this, okay? And then once I have it bent and warped so that it's hitting these bushes like this, I'm going to change this to the Vivid Light Blend mode again, and change that back to 15%. Okay, so now we should see that that light is actually kind of hitting here and then wrapping around this way. And then we'll turn the viewer navigation map on to see that. You see it's going like, whoop, and it's just kind of going around. That's actually really cool. Man, you see, like, oh, even at linear light, that is very interesting. Linear light actually, instead of bringing in too much of that color for the contrast, it's bringing in just light, and it's a little bit more powerful that way. So that's really cool. This is a really neat concept. Thank you, Heike, for the challenge. Because as I said, yes, I might be doing something for the sake of the challenge, but guess what? We're going to learn something in the process. I will say though that I think that we need some blend diff on this luminosity, so I'll double click this and then drop it in the highlight areas. Press Alt or Option to feather that so it splits and has a nice natural transition in those highlights. And we'll look at the before and the after. We're just trying to get more light into this space here. You brought us into this space for a reason. You included it in your composition for a reason. I would highly recommend getting us into that space. And with this mask, I might actually just brush here too with black on some of these areas just to kind of sculpt this light a little bit using that auto. I'm not sure if I was allowed to do that. I think Heike will let me. She's pretty cool like that. And then we'll just go like this and just kind of get some of that in there. Okay, and that is entirely too strong. But do I wipe it? No, because I needed the intent of that there. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to drop the density to get the best of both worlds, to get that nice warm light on there, but get like a 50-50 split. And there we go. Okay, so our before, after, just a little bit of light into this space is all we need, okay? And we did it with some pretty clever, creative things from Heike. Thank you. Awesome shot. Thank you, Helen. Our showcase image comes from F64 Elite member Jennifer Ferris, and I like this. I've never been to this place, but I see it quite a bit in my critique sessions, and I always enjoy it when I see it. I feel like I'm in like a medieval movie, and I've been traveling for months on my horse, and I'm just about to get to this promised land where I'm going to find all the things that I need to find because they're just not there in the little tiny village that I live in. You see, photos can stir these kinds of things in us. But what really attracted me to this image was the composition. I enjoy this composition a lot because I don't feel like it sits in your typical box of compositional rules where we have to stick to rule of thirds, we have to stick to this rule or that rule. I feel like this follows some common sense composition and has some beautiful mimicry between the foreground and the background. I think there's a beautiful amount of negative space here that wraps and surrounds that castle. Sometimes we are afraid to use that negative space, but I think here it's used very positively. And what I like about this composition the most is watch how this happens. We come in from here, we wrap around, we go down the bridge, into the castle, and then out through the clouds. There's an S shape here, and I think that's a really powerful compositional tool to drag us in and throughout the image. There's also some mimicry between this line and this line, which creates some dynamic angles from here to here, which brings us into the subject. So here we're wrapping around, but then we're being brought right back in because of those angles. To me, this is a masterful composition and very well done. So thank you very much for sharing this with us, Jennifer. I'm going to go back to my village. Okay, so we have a donation update. Man, this is exciting stuff. I mean, I was excited before. I truly was excited before. But after yesterday, we had that bump of $5,000 that came in from Circle of Dreams Foundation. That's awesome. So that's $5,000 from Circle of Dreams Foundation. That's $5,076 from individual donors. There's 107 individual donors. Thank you so much for your generosity. That's amazing. And then $1,391 from interactions here on F64 Academy, either by subscribing, downloading the self-critique guide, which you can find in the description below, or becoming a monthly elite member or annual elite member. We are at a current combined total of $11,467. And that is awesome. I had a wonderful text conversation yesterday with SJ from Give Kids Art, and she's got a special message that I'm going to put in tomorrow's video, so be looking forward to that. So go ahead and leave me a twist or a challenge below. Thank you, Heike, for that one. We came to some pretty cool discovery with that. So you see what happens when we do these twists and challenges. They shape the way that the content is created. And if you've got something that you want to say about the images here, that's great. As long as it's constructive, that's all I ask for, is just constructive comments. We don't need any more negativity in the world than we have today. Let's be positive and let's help people. That's what the whole point of this is. All right, day 23, tomorrow.